welcome to the Relationship Leadership Podcast. My name is Leonard Cochran, along with Steve Otterstrom. And this week we're going to pick up where we left off last week. Stephen spoke about the hiring process and getting the candidates in the door, how to handle those that we let go of that hiring process and maybe don't hire, and those that we do successfully get in the door. So Steve, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Leonard, and to our listeners, all 7 of you. There is a possibility that you will hear a guest speaker today. Her name is May, and she has been moving around my feet. She is a cat, and she's upset that not everybody has woken up yet. So if you do hear her, just realize we expect you to be a cat lover if you're listening to this podcast.
May is being boisterous today.
Yes, and she's got things to say. But, Leonard, I enjoyed our conversation that we had last week, specifically talking about the other side of the selection. It's not often that we talk about how to say no. Everyone looks at it from the perspective of you find that right candidate, you build the right relationship with them. But the truth is, there are no relationships that you can afford to burn. There are no bridges that it makes sense to burn as you are crossing them. You never know when you need to go back. So we had a good discussion about that. I think in many ways, when we think about the selection process, it can be compared to something that I believe you know quite a bit about, Leonard. And I think something about. Both of us have been married to our respective spouses for decades.
It's been a while.
Yeah, when you're counting it in decades, it's been a little while. And the other day when Elizabeth and I didn't see something eye to eye, we just couldn't lean back on what it was like when we were dating all those 25 years ago. We couldn't lean back and go, wow, we dated so well, we don't have issues now. I think in many ways, when it comes to what happens after the selection, it's often more important than what happens prior to the selection.
That's good, Steve. I like the analogy. Yeah, we just can't live on the past. And obviously, there's still some work ahead, although we have that relationship. That's good.
I've seen many times, actually, where people hired somebody and it didn't work out. And the organization, human resources, the hiring manager, whoever it was, they turned around and they looked at it and they said, we hired the wrong person. And that may have been the case. And in some circumstances, that is a very legitimate possibility. However, in most of those circumstances that I encountered, it really wasn't that they hired the wrong person. It's that they didn't cultivate the relationship afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And today, I'm just excited to pick your brain, Leonard. And if you haven't seen Leonard, picking his brain looks really fun. He doesn't have
There's not much there to pick.
But there's a lot of great ideas in there. I kind of imagine like a Harry Potter experience where you have the pensive and you just pull thoughts out of your mind with a magic wand. So we're going to pull out some of those magic thoughts out of Leonard's mind today. Leonard, you have the 4 P's: purpose,
yes,
principle, people, profits. And all of those are key elements in creating a relationship. You've got your new employee now, and you're now building a relationship. I would love to hear you walk us through these a little bit. And if you don't mind, I'm thinking purpose might be a good place to start because I'm your brand new employee. I'm excited. Usually new employees, they come in, I guess with the analogy of like marriage, they're in the honeymoon phase.
Yes.
And this is a unique opportunity perhaps for you to communicate the purpose. So tell me, why are we talking about purpose and not the other P word, passion?
Well, good question, Steve. And of course, we hear so much in our culture right now about following your passion, following your passion, following your passion. Statistics show really that people want to get behind a cause. People want to feel like their work is meaningful. And that really comes more out of purpose rather than just passion. because passion is, in my view, let's just clarify in Leonard's view, passion can sometimes just be a fleeting emotion, where purpose is something that is deliberate, it's long-term, and it's long-lasting. Part of the reason we're talking about this right now is once a person is hired, as you know, of course, you go through that hiring process. There's generally the first day, or sometimes it's more than one day, of that onboarding. And that's where the company talks about who they are. And so we know to be successful, a person has to have a purpose that is bigger than themselves. When they set out to build the Empire State Building, that was something that one individual couldn't do by themselves. So they had to find others that were like-minded, that had that same cause, that had that same desire, that were willing to join with them. And so their purpose was to do something bigger than one individual could on their own. And so that's one of the critical things, as I share in my book, Relational Leadership and Introduction. That's the first P in the book that we talk about, is having that purpose.
I think this is really interesting because it also plays into something that's often talked about as a key element, really, of any thriving organization, and that is this concept of diversity. You bring up, building the Empire State Building. You don't build the Empire State Building by hiring one type of craftsman.
Yes.
And in fact, what makes it work is you've got multiple different types of craftsmen, but they have the same purpose.
Yes. That's right. With anything, you've got the architects, you've got the plumbers, you've got the concrete layers, you've got all those people that have their areas of expertise. But oddly enough, somehow they come together with, again, back to that cause that's bigger than one individual, and that's their purpose. And so oftentimes in a company, that is the CEO or that is the executive board that sets down and determines, why are we in business to do what we do? And I know that's oftentimes we really don't give a lot of thought to that, I think, outside of the corporate world. But any organization really needs to have some recognition as to what their purpose is. What is it that they are pursuing, and have some understanding of that. And then tied somewhat closely to that, though, is once you kind of determine, just like you and I, Steve, we go into work because we want to earn some money. Now, that may not be the sole purpose. That's certainly a large purpose of why we go into work, but we also want to enjoy the work we do. So there's parameters, and when we start to dig deep and we start to uncover it, there's more than just earning a dollar. I could probably pound a nail and put a shingle on a roof, but that's not something that I pursue as a source of income. Number one, it's not really a skill set that I do well. I've always had a problem hammering nails. It goes all the way back to my childhood. But nonetheless, and then two, the working conditions and so on. And so, my purpose is something different than that. But with that, though, immediately following purpose, then we have our principles. And by principles, we know every good company has all these motivational posters. They have all of these things that help guide you to what it is they're trying to accomplish. And for my conversation here, this is called principles. And so the principles are what guide you on how to reach your purpose. So those are, as we put them on the wall, whether you call it a value statement or whatever you want to call that, those are the things that we know. This is the way we're going to perform our work as we pursue our purpose.
Well, let me make sure I have this down and understand what it is, because this is one of the things I've taught a lot of onboarding classes for a lot of organizations. And many of them will have some sort of purpose, or sometimes they call it a mission statement. Yes. And they say, this is what we're about. This is what we do. And the moment I read that statement, I can feel the cynicism in the room. And part of that is because I think, as not just in the organizations that I've had the opportunity to work for, but there is a real feeling that every business exist for one purpose, and you brought that up, and they exist to make money. And what I feel like I'm getting from you is the reality, well, of course you exist to make money, but why do you need to make money? On a personal level, I need to make money, but I need to make money because there are values that I support with that. There are things that I hope to accomplish with that money. So I feel like what you're getting to there is that a company's purpose, well, yes, the easy answer is it's to make money. But the more accurate answer probably transcends that in some way.
Yeah. So, for example, if we look at nonprofit organizations, it's easier to see, but it doesn't matter whether it's a nonprofit or not, but picking one, Charity Water, building wells in Africa. Well, they're technically not out there to make money. They're raising money so they can build the wells, so they can have clean water for the people that would not otherwise have clean water. So that's a nice, shiny purpose, and we can look at that. Now, if you look at a corporate company in the United States with shareholders, it might not quite look like that nonprofit, but there is still a larger purpose, whether it's, you and I came from the world of Hilton, and we know part of their purpose is sharing the light and warmth of hospitality throughout the world. And so it's a little more fuzzy. It's a little more elusive than just, we're here to make a buck. And we know at one point in time, Conrad's dream, his purpose, the way it was stated, was just simply world peace through world travel. Mm-hmm. So that in itself gives a much larger implication than, you're going to travel, you're going to purchase a hotel room, but in doing so, you're getting a bigger experience. And that's where the principles really help guide. So if the purposes are North Star, then the principles are the compass that help lead to that North Star. So we're going to give you an experience that's going to provide an experience, perhaps I should say, that's going to lead you in that direction that we think that you need to go to help our bigger vision be accomplished.
I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about this is if a company's purpose really, truly was, and you and I, we both worked at Hilton, and if Hilton's goal, if their purpose truly was to make money, then the best way to do that would be through fraud. Because my only goal is to get the money that's in your pocket into my pocket. And the best way to do that is just to remove it from your pocket and put it into mine. That is my only goal. My goal is not to make you happy. It's not that you'll be satisfied. It's not that you're going to want to come back. It's going to be, in fact, you make it even more cynical. It would be, not only do I need to take the money out of your pocket, but by force, I'm going to take everything you have. And that would be an organization that is truly has the purpose of bringing in more wealth. Now, of course, we worked for Hilton. Hilton's a profitable company, and they intended to be that way. But I wouldn't have enjoyed working for a company whose only purpose was to make money. What I enjoyed about working for Hilton was really this concept of bringing experiences to people who came and stayed. And that's another part of why it's so important that purpose is something that we introduce early on, because it's not just your company's purpose. What you're giving to an employee is a purpose. Even in the circumstance of when I first came and worked at Hilton with you, Leonard, there was this feeling like I can go to work each day, because I knew I wasn't going to come home making the millions of dollars, but I can go to work each day and I can bring the warmth and light of hospitality. And that was a good feeling. That was a good feeling. And when I worked for Marriott, we had a very similar perspective that we wanted every person to have an experience that caused them to have just a little bit better day. In fact, I feel like most hospitality people are like that. So it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from you, purpose is what we will accomplish. Principles are how we are going to accomplish that.
Yes.
Almost like a set of guidelines on how we we build the thing.
Yeah, and those principles, oftentimes, we want to keep those simple as well, just as the purpose should be kept simple. So it's easy to understand, easy to follow, and is easy to capture. We know statistically it's been pointed out, I believe we can hold, like, if I was giving you random numbers, if you're really good, you might be able to hold 4 up to maybe even 5 random numbers that I gave you at any given time. If 3-digit numbers, you could maybe hold as much as like 5. So we want something that's easy to retain and easy to understand and easy to pursue. Or when I say easy to pursue, it doesn't necessarily mean, especially back to that purpose, having clean water for everyone in the world is a purpose that you and I are never going to solve, or any one organization will ever solve. That's what charity water might be pursuing. But that gives us clarity of what the goal is, and we won't stop until we reach it, so to speak.
Be aspirational enough that it provides direction, and perhaps is something that you never achieve.
Absolutely, yes. Because otherwise, once we achieve it, we can just shut our doors, if that's all we're in business for, if that's all our organization exists for. So we want to live beyond just a pursuit of, hey, I'm going to win this one game, and then I can stop. And then what do? You have to go find a new purpose.
Find a new purpose at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and as you pointed out, those principles are the guidelines, the parameters in which we're going to do that, and how that work's going to be accomplished. And so I think it's best if we can keep those somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 to 5 principles, and then we'll be able to make those clear to our team members. Ideally, anyone should be able to recite those at any given time and understand what those are. And those principles, again, that's the work that they do and how they do their work. So, for example, with Hilton, they actually use their name as an acronym. And so they had one for each letter of Hilton. Not necessarily the recommendation, but that does happen. But it's easier if you have something that is memorable, which they've certainly done that. But oftentimes I want to encourage that to be a little bit shorter there.
When there's a time I would have even remembered what each one of the letters stood for, but it has now been 4 years.
Yes.
And I do remember that. I do remember that Hilton stood for something. I think in many ways, one of the things that is important to remember about these principles is that it's really not a matter of the organization holding the principles. And I guess what I'm trying to say with that is that organizations are lifeless, soulless entities.
Yes.
They can't have principles. The only thing that can have principles are people. People can have principles. And part of the hiring process, you probably were trying to determine, are the principles, are the values, I think that's another word that you might be able to use, are the values of this individual aligned or adjacent, close enough, similar enough that they will be driven by these? I mean, one of the things I find so interesting is when people do something and it doesn't even benefit them. Like I know, Leonard, you are very involved in, is it Leah's House? Am I getting the name right?
Yes.
You're very involved with Leah's House. And did you want to tell me how much money you made on that last year?
Personally, either way, it's not much. Leah's House is a nonprofit, and Leonard did not profit from Leah's House at all.
Yes.
Yeah, it did cost Leonard some money last year.
Yes. Leonard has no profit because of it. And the reality is, you look at that and it's easy to say, well, every organization exists to make money. Well, this one doesn't. And The reality is, you put your time, you put your effort, you put your emotional currency into this, and you're never going to get any money out of it. But this is the power of aligning tasks to values or to principles, I guess would be the better way to keep it in line with what we're talking about today. That when you're able to align the tasks that your employees do to principles that they hold dear, you have a very powerful built-in motivator.
So that's a great example of it. And again, recognizing it's a nonprofit, but that can happen with any organization. And so those principles that we walk out, because this is a nonprofit, we invest our time, talent, and treasure, as you've pointed out, the 3 T's. Like to have all these little acronyms here.
There's T's, there's P's, and there's C's.
There's P's and
when
C's.
You're dealing with Leonard.
There you go. So, but everything is an investment of our time, talent, and treasure. It's just a matter of what the return is, right? And so what we are doing when we hire someone, we're now somewhat trying to convince them that your investment of and they're not investing their treasure, but they could be earning treasure from somebody else other than you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
there's an opportunity cost.
There's an opportunity cost, exactly. You know, it's just like years ago when my kids were a little bit younger, one of their friends changed jobs and took a quarter an hour pay cut so he could go work at the movie theater because he could watch unlimited movies. Now, a quarter an hour, for most adults is not much, but for him that was a big pay cut. But the value that he got was important to him to be able to get to see those movies for free. So the return on investment, right? So we're looking at that continually. The work that we do, am I receiving a return on what I am investing? Whether it's that mental fortitude of being in the job. Sometimes our jobs can stress us out mentally. Sometimes they can stress us out physically. And so we're continually looking at that. And so back to the example you're given with Leah's house. Yeah, that's a charitable organization with a higher purpose that you have to align your principles with, or be in agreement with the principles of how we're going to pursue the larger purpose of the organization. And it's not for everyone, right? Just like you said, we may hire a candidate and recognize maybe they're not the right one, but we have to pretty well approach it because the time, talent, and treasure invested in recruiting that individual, we pretty well have to approach it from the fact that a positive intent, that we believe they're a good fit. It's just finding where their good fit is. And we talked about that in a previous episode of the person that I had that was doing a horrible job where they were, and I just needed to move them elsewhere.
It's interesting, Leonard, because I did a workshop at a ATD conference where I talked about engagement really from this perspective. And one of the issues when it comes to engagement really has to do with, are they motivated? Are they motivated to do the thing that you want them to do? And the word we say are they engaged?
Yes.
And the reality is everybody is engaged, just not with you, just not with your work. They're engaged somewhere. There's unless they're dead, but don't hire dead people. I think that would be one of the first things that we would say. But if you are living, you are engaged in some way with something. I think about my first jobs that I had like as a teenager. I think if I were to look back at that today, I may not have been as impressed with myself as a worker, because sometimes I was engaged with flirtatious conversation with the cute girl that worked next to me. I was very much engaged. I was just not engaged in what I was supposed to be doing, or I might have been engaged in any number of things. And it's always a matter of, how do I make the engagement that they have aligned with the work that needs to be done? I've had people work who their primary thing, they came to work and they worked hard because they had a value that says, if I don't work hard every day, then I don't have value.
Yeah.
A job well done was its own reward for some of those individuals. And for others, really money is important. It always has to be there. I have to make enough money, but that only works to a certain degree. And then I need something more. I need something that aligns with my values.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things to keep in mind too is the more upfront we are as organizations about what our purpose is and what our principles are, the easier it will be to find the right fit to begin with. We can talk, they get plenty of press over the last couple of years, is whether it's Hobby Lobby or whether it's Chick-fil-A. They have a very clear set of principles and an overarching purpose. Maybe people might not be as clear on, but they've got a set of clear principles. And so you may or may not align with those principles. And if you don't align with those principles, why would you pursue a job there? And so it's good for a company to make sure that they're clear with that. And it eliminates some of the hiring pool, but yet it also attracts the type of person that they're looking to hire to begin with as well. And that's true of any organization. So those two happen to be Christian organizations or run by Christian leaders and have Christian values. But, if I'm going to be hiring a stripper, they need to know that there's certain criteria that are required of the job, and that's what the job is. And so there's not
we've learned from Leonard how to hire a stripper. I really didn't expect you to go from Christian organizations to how Leonard hires a stripper.
Well, I want to show the spectrum there.
But I think you're onto something here, and it really comes down to one of the things that many employers, we talked a little bit about this last time, in looking at the way that we say no and the way that we turn people away, is that you may think it has no effect, but your employment brand is damaged. And
Yes.
It's not the only part of your brand that could potentially be damaged either, but your employment brand is very important. And it's not just important because we're trying to trick people to come work with you. It's important because your employment brand brings the right people to you as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great way of saying it, Steve. So once you've established your brand, once you've established who you are, whether it's the consumer, the person that is pursuing work, they understand who you are, and therefore it's an attraction to the right audience. Nike shoes doesn't sell shoes to everyone, but they have an audience that they attract. And so we could go on and on and on with that. And that's a great call out and a simple way of looking at that as well.
So we've got two other P's in here.
That's right. We've covered the first.
Yeah, and I feel like to some degree, it's hard to talk about one P without talking about another P. There is an overlap. They don't exist in silos or in a vacuum. These all interact one with another, and we've kind of been explaining it in a linear fashion, that
Right.
You have your purpose, your overarching goal, the reason you exist.
Yes.
And then you have your principles, which help support that purpose. It gets us going the right direction. It tells us not just what we're going to accomplish, but how we're going to do it. How do people fit into this? I feel like we've touched on a little bit, but I'm not sure we've hit it very directly.
Yeah. So of course the third P is people. And I've certainly had pushback from folks that say, well, it's really people first. And my argument there, although people are extremely critical, obviously no organization can exist without people. However, if we have an organization without purpose and without principles to pursue the purpose, then we're leading people. But are we really leading people? We have no direction, in other words. And so that's why I do put them in the order I do, is we have to have a clear, mapped out direction first, or at least a clear vision as to where we want to go first and how we're going to get there, what we're going to do to attain it. And then we can better lead people. And yes, people are critical. So that is the third P. And when we talk people, as you've already talked about, kind of that brand acknowledgement, there's a reputation the brand has. So people are more than just a focus on the customer. It's more than just a focus on the team members. It really is any people that is aware of our organization that we have to be aware of, even those folks that we don't hire. To your point, the way we handle a non-hire affects the perception of who we are. And so all of that matters. And people by far is the biggest chunk of this. To your point, the four of them are critical. I kind of look at them as a four-legged stool. But I'm sure if we were looking at those legs, the people leg is a big leg. but we do need the other areas to keep balance with things. We've heard the expression, the customer's always right. Well, if we literally insist that the customer's always right, we stand the potential of losing money. So the customer is right within particular parameters, and that's the real truth of it. I cannot give you a 100%. There's some brands that do 110% guarantee if you don't like a product, 110% return satisfaction guarantee, no question asked. But if everybody pursues that, they'd be out of business. So there's certain parameters that are in place.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing when you talk about something even like a guarantee. From a very legal perspective, a guarantee does not mean that the thing they're guaranteeing will happen. Otherwise, it's that's basically a promise. If I say, Leonard, I promise you, I will be to your house on time. That's a promise. Yeah. And when I don't get to Leonard's house on time, there is a broken promise, but that is it. I promised it would happen. But if I do a guarantee, it means I'm backing it up with something. And essentially, I'm saying, Leonard, because he knows me well enough, you know me well enough to know I wouldn't be on time, and I'm saying, Leonard, when I arrive late next week, you will get this reward, this thing. And so, like, when you have a guarantee, a money-back guarantee, you're not really saying nothing will go wrong. You're saying when it does go wrong, we'll give you your money back. We'll reimburse you for that. And It's an important distinction, especially when we're looking at moving into people and the role that people play in this whole aspect of purpose, principle, people, and profits, a holistic view of an organization. People are the soul.
People are the most important asset of any organization. And again, nonprofit or profitable, either one, it doesn't matter, because without the people doing the work can never be accomplished. And then two, the way your team, I prefer to use the term team members, the way your team members are treated will have a big impact on not only their performance, but also on the end product. So we know statistically that team members, employees, want to feel valued. In fact, here's a Forbes. Forbes did some research, and it was with Generation Z, which is roughly ages somewhere around 27 and under. 27 to 24. 96% of respondents of Gen Z said that it was important to feel valued, included, and empowered at work. And so if we don't do that, and that's our target audience, or those are team members that we have working for, if they don't feel valued, if they don't feel included, then their performance then will slip, because they are not feeling appreciated for the work that they're doing. And so we know that's going to have an impact on the work performed. I've seen it myself, in my jobs and in my past history. We know that affects them. And this day and age, too, we know all you have to do is go to, sorry to say, just about any fast food restaurant, and you'll see some people don't feel valued, and that directly affects the customer service that you receive as well. And so I know there's all kinds of dynamics we can unpack and pull through that. But in the end, if a person feels good about themselves, feels good about their work, typically their performance is going to be in a way that's pleasing for both the customer and the employer as well.
So that reciprocity is an important, or mutuality is an important aspect of what holds people together. There has to be something it has to be a two-sided relationship. And actually maybe more sides than that when we really consider what employee relationships are like. I think one of the things I would just want to add to people, and I know I've said this before, and especially if you've ever had to be in one of my classes, I apologize that I'm throwing this at you again. But one of the things that I often ask, especially when I have a class of new hires, not of new hires, but of new managers, one of the things I frequently ask them is I say, you are a manager. Tell me what you manage. Now, to be fair, these are people managers, so they have people that report to them. These aren't individual contributors. And I'll say, what do you manage? And they'll say, I manage a function. I manage a department. I manage a team. And I'll say, yes, that's all true. That's all true. But there's something even more important that you manage in this space. Well, I manage processes. I manage development. I manage, continual performance improvement programs. Like, yes, those are all very good. And you keep, adding to the list of all the things that you manage. But there's really just one thing that you manage more than anything else, and everything hangs from it. And that is that you manage relationships. You manage the relationship between you and your customer. You manage the relationships between two different employees. You manage, and I think some of the things and some of the areas where I found being a leader was a lot more difficult was when I had to wade into this people side of it. And it's very easy to say, you know what, I'm backing away from this people element. They don't like each other, but that's their problem. They have bad feelings about this or that other person. That's their issue. But the reality,
as long as the work gets done, I don't care.
As long as the work gets done. But even in saying that, it's not going to get done, or it's not going to be done as well as it could have been done. It's the whole, I don't come to work to make friends, I come to work to work. Well, I pity the person who works with you. That is really difficult. It's the comment of, you need to understand that your coworkers are your coworkers, they're not your friends. And the reality is, well, that's a horrible way to live. You're going to spend so much time with coworkers. Yeah. That managing relationships is one of the most important things that you can do in this space. And I think we could hang a lot from this, even from the learning and development perspective, from the compliance perspective. One of the reasons why people are important, and one of the reasons why there's this focus here, is that it's your job to keep them safe. That's why you teach harassment training. That's why you have programs and policies. That's why you try and foster a culture of psychological safety. All of these things happen to try and cultivate and to sustain the lifeblood of the organization, which is the people.
And I really think that's the differentiator between relational leadership and other forms of leadership. Our parents' generation or grandparents' generation, it was, you showed up, did the job, and went home. It was the mindset, not only by the companies, but also by the people doing the work. I mean, my father was a pretty outgoing guy and had plenty of friends at work, but in the end, it was all about getting the work done. My grandfather, even more so. He never really shared much about his work or the people at his work when he came home. I can remember spending the night at my grandparents and try to ask him questions about his job. And there were very few things I ever found out about what the work he did or some of his past history, because it was just a source of income. You sort of, for lack of better words, punch that clock to do the work, punch the clock, go home. You, quote unquote, left work at work and you left home at home. Well, this day and age, that does not work. One of my friends years ago said it best. It's work-life integration. And so we have work-life integration of some form or another now. I'm not saying it's always good, but it is indeed integrated into our culture and into our society.
Well, even the reality of where we work. I haven't worked I have entered buildings to do work as a consultant, but as far as like where I have actually worked, where I've been home based, I have worked in my basement, I've worked in my bedroom, but it's always been it's since 2018, it has been from home. So there has not been the possibility that I could separate work would be work and home would be home. It's integrated now.
Yeah. And even, too, if you look at pull back and look at us from a larger cultural perspective, we're no longer an agricultural society. We are much less of an industrial society. We are much more of a service-oriented society where we provide services. And so in providing services, it's easy to do the work-from-home type works. In those other jobs, they are still, you have to be there. You can't pick a potato out of the ground without being there. So
I know the virtual potato picking is a thing now, I suppose.
It probably is somewhere. But nonetheless, though, even those types of physical work, whether it's a factory or whether it is in an office, I think our mindsets have shifted. And of course, certainly psychology tells us that whatever we do at home carries over to work, and whatever we do at work carries over at home. And I think we're just getting honest with ourselves and recognizing that now. And so, crazy idea, but why don't we acknowledge that in the workplace? Why don't we as people, leaders in the workplace, acknowledge, hey, Steve, it looks like just maybe you had a bad weekend because this is only Monday and you're very upset. Do you want to talk about it? Now, I'm not a counselor and I might not be able to solve your problem, but the fact I recognize you've carried over something into the workplace, I took the time to at least talk to you about it instead of ignoring it. It might make Steve just a little bit happier to be there.
It might.
So, it might. But that's part of it. And so this is a long-term investment when we talk about relational leadership. Again, talking about those investments of time, talent, and treasure. So I'm going to have to pour into my team members, and it is that reciprocal relationship, but I have to build it so it's reciprocal as well. It's no longer just, I'm the boss, do what I say. We have to have some genuine relationship to build that credibility, to build that trust, and to have that exchange with our team members.
I've heard people say before, be careful about the relationships certainly you want to be careful about inappropriate relationships that you have at work. I want to be, clear there. But certainly I've heard people say, well, as a manager, you don't want to get too emotionally involved, because if you do, how will you handle when you have to fire them or when you have to do those things? And let me just put this out there, that the answer is it's just going to really be the worst day that you have. That you could say, I'll just spread it out and I will assume the inevitable and I will just I will hate them the entire time. That's not a very sustainable way to go. But there may come that time that you do have to fire a friend. And it's going to be bad and it's going to hurt, and it should. And if it doesn't, then perhaps you're not bringing enough of yourself to work every day. And if it does hurt, if it is something that makes it really difficult to do, that probably is a sign that you are strengthening those relationships, and it makes it less likely that you're in that situation where you're firing someone. If this is your best friend, or I don't want to say best friend, but they're a friend of yours and you're a friend of theirs, well, so I'm working with you, Leonard, and you need me to come on time every day. Well, I may not do that for myself, but I may do it for you.
Yeah.
And so that relationship creates real leverage that you have. And people, because they know it'll hurt if they have to at some point terminate that relationship, instead they decide to preemptively terminate the relationship and make sure it never actually develops. And what I'm saying is that's a bad idea.
Yeah. In fact, when I shared the title of my book with someone in my family that expressed an interest in knowing about it, I sent them the link to Amazon, and there it was. And I received a text response of them basically saying what you did. Oh no, I've had some bad experiences with relationships at work. That's not word for word what they said, but that's what they said. And what the challenge with that is, my challenge to that, I should say, is if you've had bad relationships at work, then frankly, lay my cards out. Maybe you weren't doing your job correctly. If a friendship at work prevents a team member from doing their job properly, then you maybe weren't as good of a boss as you needed to be. And that's the hard thing.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing now, because we're talking about relationship, but that doesn't mean we're soft. It doesn't mean that we let our team members walk on us. That doesn't mean that they don't have to perform because they're a friend of ours. But that just means we're going to have some tough conversations with them if they're trying to leverage that the wrong way. You were talking about leveraging the relationship. Mm-hmm. Well, if they're trying to leverage that to their advantage, then we're going to have to step up and have to make the hard decision to make some correction and have a conversation with them and let them know what's expected of them.
Which takes us full circle to where we start. What you manage are relationships.
Absolutely.
And relationships are people.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to get to this final P. It's the fun P.
It's the fun P. The final P is profits. And that's the easy one. And really, in the grand scheme of things, dare I say this out loud, but I will. In the grand scheme of things, profits at this point almost become an afterthought. If we've done things correctly, we're pursuing a purpose that has meaning. We're pursuing a purpose that people can get behind and see the vision. We've aligned our principles on how we want to achieve that purpose, and we work together with it. And we have those people management skills that we just chipped the top of the iceberg just now. We could go on with those. Then profits will follow almost inevitably, unless we're just doing poor work. But if we're doing things correctly, priced correctly, so on. So the reason I mentioned profits, though, is because when we have those other focuses, oftentimes, number one, people think that we are talking about nonprofit organizations, and it can be any organization. But then number two, the real emphasis that I place on profits is maybe a better way of saying it is stewardship. So there's nothing wrong in having profit, but how we have to determine what is a sensible profit, and then how are we going to invest those profits we make. And as we know, back to the old making money, we've got Bernie Madoff and all these other people that made a lot of profit, but they weren't doing it ethically. And so, as a good organization, as a good person for that matter, it's being a reasonable steward of what we have and then investing that properly afterwards. So those profits need to go back into the organization. They need to go back into our people. And then we need to probably in this day and age diversify a little bit as well and have some safety nets or investments into other areas as well. And so that's just kind of a quick nutshell on what profits are there.
Well, I think one of the best ways to think about profits, too, if you're looking at that and saying, well, what does this mean? Well, hopefully your purpose tells you what to do with the profits.
That's a good call as well, yes.
That, if your purpose is, I think about when I worked for Merit Vacation Club, the purpose was to become the premier provider of vacation experiences worldwide or something close to that. So now that you're getting these profits coming in, this helps you know where you're going to invest. You don't end up investing in something that is outside what your organization does. We wouldn't say, well, now we're going to, start building widgets. No, that doesn't have anything to do with what our purpose is. It also brings in why it's so important to craft this purpose. And I wouldn't say that, I would even go as far as to say that if you are the only one crafting the purpose, it's probably not a very good one. That it probably needs to be one of the best ways that you get buy-in is by letting people buy in, let them put some effort into what it is that we are creating. So if you have something like a purpose and you're building your purpose, the great way to make people feel like it's their purpose is to have it be their purpose. Have them help put that together, have them help refine that over time. We've looked at this kind of from the perspective of when you're bringing in or you're onboarding a new individual, but you have to realize that these 4 Ps are going to happen over and over again, and it's going to be something that they experience throughout their entire life cycle within your organization. And letting them have that purpose, letting it be their purpose, letting them help tweak that is one of the things that's really going to make the purpose more purposeful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good call out, Steve. You're right. These 4 Ps do not just live at the beginning of a hiring process. They do not live at just in the onboarding process, but they exist throughout. And just like any good organization, there's times we need to set back, reevaluate, look at things, and make sure it's still on task and still on target for where we are today. And that's absolutely correct.
Purpose, principles, people, and profits.
And there you have it. And so that is my take on relational leadership. That is in the. It's not a shameless plug for my book, but I'm just letting you know where this is found in Relational Leadership and Introduction. And that just scratches the surface of what that is. And that was my intent in writing the book, was just to help folks to see that overarching umbrella. And then everybody can do the deep dive. And of course, that's ultimately what we're doing as this podcast progresses. We're doing the deep dive into all of these different areas where we can have some better understanding of them and maybe implement them throughout our work in different areas. And also, we can have not only an organization that functions that way, but as individuals, we can function that way as well. So I may be in an organization that has a poor purpose, or I'm not perfectly aligned with the purpose, or the some of the principles they have. We've all been there where we didn't necessarily drink the Kool-Aid and admire all the purposes. But I can, within my own department, with my own space, whomever I work with, the people that I'm around, if I have any people that I lead, I can have and incorporate these things into my own area as much as the structure of the organization allows. And I guarantee, back to that guarantee, Steve, I guarantee you'll be much happier if you implement these.
So how are you backing that guarantee? Are you just promising? And you said guaranteeing.
Just promising. It's a weak promise, but I believe it to be true.
Well, I'm excited also for next week because we've really talked about these 4 Ps, and we've put this in the context to some degree of like a new hire onboarding. We'll probably at some point come back and revisit each one of those a little bit more in depth. But I understand you have another 4 letters for us that we'll talk about next time.
Yes.
Tell us about these 4 letters. Just briefly, we want to make them. We leave them hungry.
Leave them hungry.
Don't give them everything. We want them to listen to the next one.
Yeah, and that's. I'm in the process of writing a follow-up book now that incorporates these 4 concepts, and these are 4 C's, and so it's conversation, connection, collaboration, community. And I'll just leave it at that for now. We'll unpack that more next week. But I believe that those are the 4 constants of success, that when we have these 4 areas and we do them well, I believe that we'll see success over the long term. So the relational leadership, the 4 Ps that I laid, are foundational for the organization and how the organization should function. And then as that organization's functioning, I think these 4 Cs overlay it and are a critical part of keeping that organization running. So with that, I believe our time is up, so we'll go ahead and close out for today. So just want to thank you all for listening. Love to have your feedback. Be sure to like and share all of that fun stuff we do on social media. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye-bye, everyone.